Hello, welcome to Accountability Partners. Here, we hold each other accountable in our spiritual walk with God. In each episode, we share what it looks like to nurture our souls and mature spiritually in our everyday lives. Let's talk, grow, and step into all we were created to be, one conversation at a time. Hello.
Hey girl, how you
How are
doing this
you?
morning? I'm good.
I'm good
I
too.
am
Super good.
good. This has been a week. Some of the things that have been coming up for me, two things specifically. I wrote them down, so let me get my
Okay.
glasses so I can,
Okay,
my
yes.
eyes are getting older. Okay. Okay. When God doesn't want you to do something, I'm learning what that looks like for me. I know
Okay.
that might sound, let me explain it. Let me break it down a little bit. um it's so individual, right? But in the past I've been thinking, okay, if this opportunity doesn't happen, if this thing
Mm-hmm.
blows up or whatever it is, I've been looking at it from a space of what didn't I do right? What did I do wrong? Instead of this is the way that God is walking. Everything in my life is
Mm-hmm.
ordained, right? So this is something using it as instruction, right? Like this delay. Okay, God is saying, okay, wait a minute. What do I need to learn here? And just really kind of leaning into that, I realized how much I've been like just hard on myself about the things that are happening instead of looking at it from the lens of instruction from the Holy Spirit, right? Guidance
Yeah,
from the Holy
exactly.
Spirit.
No, I've felt the same, that when God doesn't want you to do something, I usually feel a lack of peace when I
Mm,
pray. A
mm,
lot of times there's unexpected roadblocks.
uh-huh,
It happened to me when I was making a big move. I was moving countries and you're
uh-huh.
just not sure, but then all of a sudden everything's easy. Like you said, sometimes there could be delays, there could be roadblocks. Would you think it's God's way of saying no,
I
you know?
think either no, not right now, or go this way. I
Mhm,
think
mhm.
the shift in perspective, or the way I needed to shift the way that I've been thinking about it, is you are not in control, right? So I
Yes,
think
yes,
that
yes.
that was the thing that I realized this week. Like, Holy Spirit is guiding me, period. If I let my hand off the wheel and I say every day, I'm relying upon you, God, you do what you want to do. During the day, sometimes I realize when I put my hand back on the wheel, right? Like I realize
Yes.
those things. And in that moment, I forget that I'm being led. So then I kind of thwart the process. I kind of um, create an unnecessary delay, or when I'm thinking I have so much control over what's happening. You know what I mean? Like, so what I'm realizing
Mhm,
is
yes.
now pay attention more in my day. Pay attention more in my day of what is he saying? What am I being led to do? Okay, look at this block as something purposeful versus I made the wrong decision. That's why I'm here, right? Like just kind of like
Yes.
just a lot of pride, right? A lot of like control and that shift in
A lot
mindset
of
of
me, or like, "I did it
yeah,
because of me.
yeah,
What do I
and
need to
shift
do?"
right and shifting that mindset to God is ordering every one of my steps because I asked him to, right? Oh
Yep.
my gosh, that's been
It's
so good. That's been so good for me this week to realize that. And it's actually brought me closer. I noticed that this revelation for me has brought me just more ease in my prayer life too. Like when I'm talking to God, when I'm just
yes.
having conversations with him and just admitting to him, like, I need your guidance in everything, everything, everything. Not one thing, not only
Mhm.
when I ask, but even if I'm not intentionally asking, I need you to guide me, you know?
Exactly, and it's crazy you say that because I was watching, a sermon this morning, and the title of it was "No Longer I, but Christ in Me."
Right.
And it's really like what you're talking about. We have to do every include him in our everyday and every little thing. Like he's our provider, but he's also our consultant. We can ask him any question. We can go to him for advice, for direction, for comfort, for peace. And it's crazy how surrendering all to him gives you freedom. It kind of sounds like counterintuitive, but it
Yeah, no,
it
you
gives
have to
you
let
this
go to hold
peace and
on. I always say
clarity.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
crazy when you let
Let go
go,
to
you get
hold on.
clarity, you get peace, but then the more you hold on, the more confused you feel, you know?
But
And
here's the thing too that I think is important to also acknowledge is that if you don't life has a way of not or making you not trust what you know, right?
Mhm.
And so, especially if you're driving a car on your own, right? Let's say you've just been handling everything in life. Life throws at you, and you've been walking 10 years thinking it's just you, and not
Mhm.
realizing how God has been orchestrating everything, right? So you start to
Yeah.
distrust yourself. And so when you do that, oh God, I lost my train of thought, but I'm gonna try to find it. Come on, Lord. But when you begin to follow the guidance and really take your eye off of you and realize, like, okay, this isn't me, it's God telling me what to do, then
Mhm.
you can just ease in and go with the flow. But if you
Yes.
don't trust, this is why it's so important to like really heal your soul, right? Really pay attention to what's um uh don't fall into the misunderstandings that you've been running your life according to all these other things. I know that was a can't get it out. When
Mhm.
it comes so fast
I
and I can't
agree.
get it out. But you know what I mean? Like if you don't if you think you're making all the moves, you're not going to trust and you've made some mistakes and you're thinking it's your mistakes, you're not going to trust what he's saying, right? So that's why it's so important to
Yeah,
realize
exactly.
I'm trusting the Holy Spirit, and because I asked that, I can trust what
Yep,
I'm getting.
exactly. It's no
Oh,
longer me.
yeah, so that's been big for me this week, and just kinda every day watching that unfold and watching how that looks now for me, because I'm
No, I
intentionally,
love
like
that.
that's been good. Okay, so here's this week's accountability question. How can you be more accountable for your own spiritual life? I can't wait to see what you discover. And here's the other thing. This is a big one, though. I mean, that was big too, but this is
Okay.
like,
Yes, tell me.
okay, what? Let me see how I'm going to say this. What happens after the deception? So, what I mean by that, what happens after you are deceived, whether in a relationship with a boyfriend, a husband, or
Mhm.
even a spiritual leader, right? Like what happens after
Okay. Okay.
you feel betrayed or deceived by someone that you leaned on or whatever the case is. And I realized that there's so
Mhm.
much let's take the spiritual leader aspect of it, right? There's so much carnage if you experience um deceit by a spiritual leader, right? Like some people don't bounce back from
Yeah.
that. They're just like, but what I'm realizing is for me, that's a check to see where my eye was in the first place. Was my eye on that man or was it on God? Like
Oh
it's
my
kind of
goodness,
like God chin checking
yes.
you,
Yes.
right? Chin checking you, but like, were you okay? So
It
now this
is.
man
Mhm.
fell. This man is doing these things. Are you gonna not believe in me? So that shows you where you've been idolizing or where your eye has been. So now, if he fell,
Yeah.
now do you think your
Where were
prayers
your
weren't
eyes?
heard? Right, exactly. You think your prayers weren't heard? You think, all these other things? It just so that's one thing that can happen when you start to see when you're deceived or something happens, even in a relationship. You're like, okay, I'm deceived. Is my life
Yep.
over?
Mhm.
Some people think that, or are the things that I used to believe is not true anymore? Like your whole life crashes, and I think that in deception, we have to look at it from an aspect of this is an opportunity for me to elevate out of a situation versus wallowing in the hurt of it all. I know I'm not saying I feel it. I'm saying take your time with it, feel it, but don't stay there. Look at what's being offered to you in that moment, right? The clarity that
Yeah.
you gain.
Were you putting a little too much trust in them? Was your life revolving a little too much around them?
Right, because I think that a lot of times we run through the messages. So I'm sure we've had warning signs before the deception, but we didn't pay
Yep.
attention to them,
Yep. And when you
right?
ignore it, that little voice
Uh,
gets dimmer
my
and dimmer
gosh.
until you don't hear it anymore. Until
Yep.
something happens and you're like, wait,
Yeah, I heard a
okay.
sermon this week, going back to my sermon this week, about how, you'll get a loud blaring um sound, like, don't do that, right? And then if you run through it,
Mhm,
it gets
mhm.
smaller and smaller. That's what so that was so good. But I'm like, gosh, yes, it's like you were warned, but you wanted to do what you
Yep.
wanted to
The
do.
flags are
And
there.
then, yeah. So then it's kind of like, what happens after that? Like, you have to unravel yourself from the deception then, right? So now the work begins to kind of recalibrate. What are you
Yeah.
thinking?
Like, how
What
do
are you
you
thinking? Does this make
reprogram
sense?
yourself?
Yeah, you have to oh, man.
And
So
how would
where is it
you,
think?
let's say, after the deception, what would you suggest to do? Let's say to recalibrate, reprogram, kind of snap back into it.
First of all, don't personalize it, because you can spend
Mhm.
years personalizing it and roll it in your head like, I can't believe that I would put myself in a position and allow this to happen and all that. Just knowing, it's like, no, God had this happen for some reason. And start to go into prayer like, okay, what is it? Help, let me keep my eyes focused on what I'm supposed to get from this experience of being deceived versus what I didn't do and how again, self, right?
Mhm.
I could have prevented it, right? Because if you could have prevented it, you would have prevented it. So,
Yep, 100%.
what am I supposed to learn from this situation? And then start to feel, okay, I feel I'm deceived, but I feel peace and I feel stronger. My head is getting clear. Like, do a check on you for real, not from the place of being hurt. And so I know that takes time because,
Mhm.
especially depending on where you are, right? It also takes maturity to be able to do this because it's hard. So I remember
I
back in
agree.
the day, years ago, in my younger days, being deceived and just being in anger. So it takes maturity to do this, but if you don't even talk about it being possible for you to move this way, you'll never know that you can do it or try it.
I'm sure during the deception, I mean, obviously it's called deception because we're deceived, we're not gonna know, but then other people could be pointing it out, but we don't wanna listen,
We don't
you
want to
know?
listen, right?
And
Yeah.
we have to
So
learn the hard way sometimes, and then eventually we'll realize.
yeah. So here's some things that I wrote down in my phone when I was thinking about this. I wrote, betrayal helped me to see where I was placing my security. I had a false sense of
Mhm.
security. And when that thing deceived me, my security was gone, right? That's a false sense.
Yeah.
When my eye was not on God, because He is not a man that He should lie, right?
Mhm.
Um, the other thing was, let me see. Um, let me see if it makes sense. Sometimes I jot down and it doesn't make sense. And all of my dependency on other things. Oh, it showed me again where I was dependent on other things other than God. I thought about how a lot of people who do get deceived feel embarrassed, right? They feel embarrassed. They take on the shame, like they feel embarrassed. I did feel that way, but I do not now. Um, yeah, those are things I wrote down, but it's good to see those things and know that you can live in a place where you can actually operate from that perspective versus feeling embarrassed or wallowing in
Yeah.
regret.
It really opens your eyes and tells you where your eyes are at, where your heart is at, where your spirit is at. It's necessary sometimes to snap out of it.
You have to. Sometimes it's weird to say, but it's on purpose. Like, nope, I'm trying to take you somewhere else.
Yep.
So let me break this thing because you didn't get the memo. I've been trying to leave you to leave or to walk away or to listen closer to what someone is saying so that you aren't deceived.
Have you heard the quote like rejection is redirection, but rejection
Yeah.
is protection from God
Yeah. Yeah.
a lot of the
And
times.
even in that quote, what I like to do, because sometimes I can hear a quote and I'm like, oh, that makes sense, which it does make sense. I'm saying what I've started to do is actually break down, okay, well, what does that mean? If rejection is
Mhm.
protection in what way? Like, what does that look like in my life, in here, right? Like, if I'm rejected,
Yes.
okay, what was that protection from? Where are my blind spots? What am I not seeing? How did I even get to a place where I needed that experience of rejection to be protected?
Yeah.
Like, I just go a little bit deeper with that,
No, exactly. That's
you know?
an amazing way to look at it. And then how would you, let's say, if someone had to ask you how to identify those blind spots, how would you go about it?
I think it's per circumstance. It's individual, right? Like, now it's kind of like you don't see what you should have seen until after the fact. Like me, okay, when you get that thing in your gut, pay attention to it, right? Again, trusting what
Mhm.
you know, trusting how you feel, trusting what God is saying to you, knowing it's not you. And if you ask, he's leading you. So he's giving you a nudge for a reason. So don't roll through that, right? So
Yeah.
that's that's one thing, like paying attention to that. And then really listen to what people are saying,
Okay. Like
right?
the people around you?
Just okay, the person that, let's say, deceived you, right?
I see what you mean.
Listen to what they are saying. If it doesn't make sense to you, if it's confusing, it is. But a lot of times we just kind of like, oh no, because either we are happy about what they're giving us, or we love them, or we think they know, we've created all these things, or even they position themselves as being the authority on something. Still need to check. You still need to
Mhm.
listen to what they're saying. Like, don't diminish your intellect, your maturity, or your ability to know things. Like, if it doesn't sound right to you, it's not like something might be
There's
signaling.
something not right.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
So that don't make a blind spot for yourself. Don't give away your discernment. Um don't. That's why it's so important to also know your worth, know your value, know who you are, know that you can question, know that you can, you know, all of those things. Like, know when you were creating a blind spot,
See.
self-inflicted blind spot. So,
And it's
I don't know.
always
That's
usually
it.
self-inflicted. We see the signs from before, we decide to ignore it, and that little voice and that, that gut feeling, that intuition, it gets lowered until it's just a
Yeah, like,
whisper and you don't hear it anymore.
yeah, that's important. Like, notice when it sounds loud the first time. And then even when it gets smaller, you
Exactly.
hear it, but it's like, no, I don't believe it at that point. But
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Or the person
Right.
tells you like, "Oh," they make you feel crazy. That's why it's good to check yourself, bring it
Yeah.
back. Even bring it back to God, the feeling, you know,
Always bring it
and
back,
praying
right?
about it.
Like, oh gosh,
Mhm.
yes. Yep.
Even testing anything, even, let's say, like you said, like a spiritual leader or someone in authority or anyone where you're getting a piece of info, it resonates, but it's always good to take it back
You gotta
to
test
God
it. You
and
gotta
test it
test
in the
it.
spirit.
You gotta test it. You gotta get into the word. You gotta read it for yourself. And you have to pray for God to reveal to you, right? To a
Yes.
personal
Uh-huh.
revelation to help you see the word deeper. That I think that's where I am now, like really reading and studying for myself and praying that God reveals to me what he is saying in his word, depending on what I'm studying, like really taking that time.
Yes.
So we gotta work out our own salvation. Just playing. But no, I'm not playing. I'm serious.
No, I
You can't
love
just leave
that.
it to someone else. You have to study and be accountable, right?
Stay accountable by visiting howigrew-today.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter for weekly journal prompts delivered every Sunday, along with reflections and spiritual prescriptions shared every week.